Hey guys, JV here with a commentary on the ending of Mass Effect Andromeda. Last night we finally completed Andromeda's main story on stream, and I shared some of my thoughts afterwards, but I wanted to expand further in a series of commentaries for the channel, so this is just one of many. But before we go any further, if it wasn't abundantly obvious, there are major story spoilers in this video. We're going to be talking literally point by point on the last mission. I'm going to be sharing my thoughts in some of those portions, so do not watch this if you don't want to know anything about the ending or the last story mission of Andromeda. Let's start from the top of the final mission called Meridian The Way Home. And right before this mission, if you guys don't remember, we pretty much went to this giant remnant structure that was out in space that we thought was Meridian, found out that it actually wasn't Meridian, and then we had to go out and gather more data in order to find out more. So after analyzing the Scourge data, we were able to find Meridian, and Ryder goes ahead with his Pathfinder team back to Sara, I think is how you're supposed to say that. I'm not exactly sure. But when you're back there on the mission, it doesn't take long to find out that the Archon actually lets Ryder find Meridian at Sara after, analyzing all the data as a distraction. He's distracting Ryder, and then he actually attacks Hyperion for Sam. So all along, he was really kind of aiming for Sam because he realized that that's what allowed Scott to interface with Remnant technology, and that's what's going to allow him to harness the power of Meridian. So the Archon attacks Hyperion for Sam. He cuts the link between Sam and Scott, and then Scott, I think, dies or something. He passes out. I think he pretty much dies like he did earlier in the game when the Archon actually captured him. But yeah, the plan is to use Sam to weaponize Meridian to further, the Ket's claim on the Andromeda Galaxy. So really, if you think about it, the whole reason that the Archon succeeds is because humanity and the rest of the Milky Way species arrive in Andromeda with the technology that allow the Archon to interface. So it's kind of interesting when you look at it from that perspective. So anyways, yeah, that severed connection, I believe, causes Scott to die. And then we had this really cool sequence that really surprised me. I really enjoyed it, where Sara, who is, more healthy, not completely healthy, I don't think, but she's healthy now in this crisis situation, she must send a reboot signal from a communications relay in Hyperion to save Scott while the Ket are actually attacking Hyperion. So you have a small little sequence, takes maybe 5 minutes. I really enjoyed that. That was really a surprise to me, and I do kind of like when games do that. I'm not a big fan of games taking away the power from the protagonist. You spent all this time and all of a sudden you're pretty much useless, although I did think it made sense in this situation. Archon attacked Hyperion, got to Sam node, severed the connection. He did, intelligently realize, hey, this is how I can actually make the Pathfinder useless. But I think once Sara reboots Scott through the Sam implant, he struggles out of that area and whatnot. Then he activates an entire remnant force to fight the Archon. That's a really cool moment there. But what I'm getting to is the point where I believe it's assumed that Scott has some of the power that Sam gives him through the implant without Sam having a, strictly speaking, direct connection. So he's not communicating with Sam back and forth to open stuff. He's interfacing himself with remnant objects. And so I think that's going to be a plot point moving forward into the rest of whatever the Andromeda trilogy or series is going to be, if they do happen to make another game. So after activating those remnant forces, then there's a small part back on the Tempest that I thought was kind of strange. It was kind of an intermission sequence where it was like you could go and talk to your crew. You couldn't do everything, but there were small things that you could do, and then you could take the final fight to the Ket at Meridian. That was kind of setting the stage for that. I thought it was a little bit weird, but it does make sense. So after that little moment, you head to Meridian with the remnant forces, then everyone else swoops in and helps you. It's a really cool moment, but you get little cutscenes kind of interspersed in there where you see that the Hyperion is successfully hijacked by the Archon and all of his forces and is being led to Meridian, just like Scott is going to attack Meridian. That's kind of where the big final fight is going to take place. And he's also holding Sara hostage. So his plan is to use her implant with Sam to weaponize Meridian. We get these really cool sequences where the Tempest finally arrives in Meridian, which is this big dome looking thing with almost a tropical paradise inside. It's really beautiful. So the Tempest arrives and then drops the Nomad down, and we get this awesome driving sequence with this beautiful beautiful landscape, and in the distance we see kind of what we're going for, and that moment right there triggered immediately. I said it on stream, I'm like, this really reminds me of Mass Effect 1 on Ilos. When you're there, you learn more about the Protheans in just the nick of time. I mean, Saren and Sovereign are about to attack the Citadel. You don't know what you're going to do. You finally drive down while time is running out to the conduit, and that shoots you straight to the Citadel. Then you fight Saren. That kind of feeling is very similar in this situation to me. We're driving, this again, giant awesome background in the distance, finally going to the final battle with the Ket, with Archon, and defeat him. And on the way, also, you get this little sequence. If you did the mission, the side mission earlier, I think it was a side mission, might have been a primary mission, but there's a little deal that you can make with Primus, who is kind of the Archon's second man in command. I think, you know, right-hand man, whatever you want to call her. I think it's a her. But yeah, if you did broker that deal, you have an opportunity to kill the shields on her ship if you make that deal, which kind of makes the fight easier. Maybe? I don't think it makes it any easier in actuality. I don't think that's an actual choice that, you know, impacts anything in the game. I could be wrong. But of course, you know, I only saw the ending that I did. So yeah, there's a bunch of fighting in the next sequences. You make it to an awesome Remnant city that's underground. It's kind of a culmination of all the Remnant architecture we've seen before into one package, and it's beautiful. I mean, that blew me away on stream. Meanwhile, you see Ark Hyperion is crashing, and Captain Dunn sends everyone to cryopods, and she's expecting to die, but she does some kind of maneuver that either saves her life or she dies, and she still saves a bunch of people in their cryopods. I'm not sure what actually triggers her living or dying. I think some people said whether or not you got all the Pathfinders. I'm not really sure on that. But also you see that the Archon directly connects himself to Meridian, and that's how he's going to weaponize it, and he's drawing power directly from Meridian. You also see that he's holding Sara hostage, and he also turns a giant architect on Scott. So there's this entire sequence where Sara basically says, you need to shut down his power. He's getting too powerful, and if you shut down his power, then you can stop him from weaponizing Meridian. So after a lot of fighting sequences, Scott interfaces with all the power relays in the final one, takes back power from the Archon, and that kills him in the process. So it's really not, strictly speaking, a boss fight like Saren was. At the very end, you're really just kind of going around to different objectives, waiting for hacking to take place, that sort of thing, defeating waves and waves of enemies. Definitely more enemies than you see at any other part of the game, which totally makes sense. But after that, after you interface with the final power relay, Meridian does go online, and then you see a short cutscene of the immediate effect on planets. There's like vegetation growing on Eos immediately. There's some cool magical stuff going on Kadara and Havarl, I believe. It's actually really cool. And so after that sequence, you realize the main threat of the Archon is dead. And then at the end of the credits, I don't know again if this is tied to whether or not you brokered a deal with Primus or not, but the Primus is, you know, still a threat, as she promised. She said she would help you take down the Archon because she thinks the Remnant are useless and they're not part of their plans in Andromeda, but she also promised to still kill anyone that was in their way of exalting everyone. And that's a huge conflict of interest, you know, between Milky Way and the Angara that are already there. And so I'm sure that's going to be a plot point moving forward if there are sequels. So that was really just a crash course recap of what happened at the end of the story and some of my thoughts kind of spliced in there. So now let's take a moment to compare the ending and kind of the overall story to Mass Effect 1. And you may be wondering, why Mass Effect 1? Why not any other game in the original trilogy? I think it's appropriate here because this is when we first got new species. Obviously, it was the first Mass Effect game, so we were first kind of exposed to all of this lore and all of this rich history and whatnot. And we're kind of re-exposed with Andromeda, with the Angara, and the Ket and the Remnant, and learning more about these alien races. I want to start by comparing the main villains. So that would be Saren versus Archon. So Saren, as we know, was indoctrinated by the Reapers. He was really just misled. He was used like a tool to further the Reapers' effort. They were essentially controlling him and dictating his actions. He also let the Reapers modify him. Of course, he was indoctrinated, so he accepted that. He really turns into a monster by the end of the game. Regardless if you can convince him to kill himself or not, he still attacks you in his Reaper form. So he turns into a complete monster, and he is defeated at the end of the game. Switching over to the Archon, we know through some of the extended lore and datapads and other information that the Archon is part of a larger civilization of Ket somewhere else. I think they're in a different galaxy, but they were sent by a larger civilization to exalt, I don't know if you can use that like that, for exaltation in Andromeda. They were supposed to turn the Angara into Ket foot soldiers, basically
basically take over the entire galaxy, all of the sentient life there. And so the Archon, as we know, is obsessed with the Remnant. We figure out that's actually for a good reason. He had people within the Ket that doubted him because that wasn't their, prime directive. It wasn't the reason they were there. It wasn't for the Remnant, but he saw the Remnant as a tool to, really take over Andromeda and complete the mission of the Ket. So he knew that he needed to use Sam to weaponize Meridian. For me, I felt the Archon was more imposing than Saren was. And again, we're looking at this from a scope of just Mass Effect 1 and then compared to Andromeda. That's my opinion. I felt that he was more intimidating just because I knew that Saren was indoctrinated. You kind of find that out midway through. The Archon knows what he's doing, and he's doing it for a very particular purpose. I don't feel that Archon or Saren, neither of them are great antagonists, and I think that's because they feel absent in the story. There are definitely main story points where you go and you tangle with the Archon. Same with Saren, very particular moments in the story, and I think that has to do a lot with the structure of these games and the fact that you can do a bunch of side missions and stuff. There can be a lot of time that passes, things don't line up exactly, then when you finally do see them again, you're kind of like, well, I haven't seen you in a while. You're not that, imposing. I think that's just the nature of these open world, non-linear experiences. I wish that the Archon was more present throughout the story in the side quests. I wish that he was more pervasive. You see him a few times, you hear about him, but that's it outside of the main primary missions. There's really not that many of them. I mean, you do have to get viability across the planets, but I don't think you can really consider that story. It's kind of like a means to an end. It's not the direct story. You're doing a bunch of random things in order to increase the viability. It all makes sense narratively speaking, but when you actually interact with the Archon, it doesn't feel like it's enough. When you compare the Ket and the Reapers, which I think is a completely other video's worth of conversation, discussion, it's really interesting. There's obviously a comparison between exaltation and indoctrination. They do seem kind of similar, but the methods are different. Maybe the purposes are different as well, because we know the Reapers had a very specific purpose with the 50,000 year cycle and all of that. They're just harvesting, whatever it may be. Then we have exaltation, where you kind of don't know the true reason why the Ket are using exaltation in Andromeda particularly, but I do plan to do more research and go back and really compare these two things in a video in the future. I think that'll be interesting. So let's shift over to the main conflict of each of these games, Mass Effect 1 and Andromeda. Let's start with Andromeda. So the main conflict of Andromeda is finding a home for the Milky Way species, for humanity in Andromeda. And of course, that had us increasing viability on a number of planets, so we could actually get people out of cryosleep and on those planets and living, starting our civilization in Andromeda. That also had to do with dealing with the Angara one way or another. In my playthrough, I chose to be very diplomatic and respectful of the fact that the Angara were here before us, and so we should respect them and work with them and ally with them. However, I believe you could definitely choose a lot of dialogue options, which, just furthered the cause of the Milky Way species and the Pathfinder Initiative, the Andromeda Initiative, in finding a new place for the Milky Way species, putting that ahead of the Garen Concerns. And then we had the conflict of defeating the Archon and the Ket. So I think there were a lot of moving parts with the main conflict of Andromeda, and it seems like more so than what was going on in Mass Effect 1. I'm sure there's a degree of recency bias going on when I'm talking about this, but we have to kind of separate Mass Effect 1 from Mass Effect 2 and 3. It's hard to do that when we're talking about it, but I think we have to in order to fairly compare these two games. Back to Mass Effect 1, it seemed like we had less moving parts and things seemed more simple. Maybe because that game was more linear than Andromeda is. It was very simply stop Saren, figure out why he's doing what he's doing, stop him, why is he recruiting the Geth, he's a rogue Spectre, on and on. Why won't you believe Shepard? That was a big thing, a big theme in the original game. And then it expands when you go to Vermeer and learn more about the Reapers and Sovereign and their Grandmaster plan. There's certainly a degree of politics in both games. You have to deal with the Council, which is always doubting you in Mass Effect 1. And then in Andromeda, we have the Initiative, Pathfinder HQ, Tan, Addison, Kesh, Kandros, all of them working together in this dire situation. That's definitely a similarity between these two games, but both of them also established a lot of mystery. There's some very mysterious things going on, questions that have not been answered so far. In Mass Effect 1, we had the mystery about the Reapers and the Protheans, this ancient race that supposedly had all the answers to stop the Reapers, but weren't able to. And you're learning just enough in Mass Effect 1 to stop Saren. That's pretty much what you get at the end of of Mass Effect 1. It all happens very, very quickly, but still, at the end of Mass Effect 1, after, you know, we see the ending, Sovereign being defeated, the Reaper threat being defeated, for now, there was still that impending threat of a massive Reaper attack that Shepard had to stop at some point. And he even says it at the very end. He's like, we're just getting started, and it's an awesome moment. In Andromeda, the mystery surrounded everything in the Andromeda Galaxy. When you first get there, you know nothing about it. That's kind of the same feeling we got in Mass Effect 1 because we were first introduced to this universe. And so in Andromeda, it's about learning just enough about the Remnant in order to find a home for humanity, figuring out how to utilize that technology in order to create atmospheres that were livable and find a home for the Milky Way species and all of that. And also wrapped in that was defeating the Ket. We don't know the Ket's true primary motivations. We know that it's exaltation, but there's got to be something even more going on that we still don't know. We have questions about the Jardan, who are apparently an alien race that are extinct that created the Remnant and the Angara. Either they're extinct or they left. We don't really know. We also have this weapon that was used, the Scourge, as we call it, and it's just throughout the Andromeda Galaxy. The Angara have been dealing with it forever, it seems. I don't think they know truly what the origin is. And so we find out more about that, but we don't know why it was deployed, who deployed it, if it was the Jardan, you know, on and on. There's a lot of mystery established in Andromeda. Part of what was so charming about Mass Effect 1 was that mystery of the Reapers and the Protheans, and I think that Andromeda at least tries to emulate that level of mystery and hook people in. It definitely has hooked me. I want to know about the Jardan. I want to know about the Remnant and the Angara origins. I want to know about the Ket, where they come from, and what their true intentions are with exaltation, and all of that. So to kind of wrap up this discussion, we talked about a lot of things in this video, you know, the ending, comparison between Andromeda and Mass Effect 1. I think that Andromeda drew a ton of inspiration from the original game. It really did, and we're really strictly speaking about the story and the ending and how all of that went down. Again, a lot of things just jogged my memory, very nostalgic memories of what went down at the ending of Mass Effect 1, all of the mystery surrounding it, and then kind of setting the stage for the future of the trilogy. Again, I don't think that BioWare knows, because they are under EA now, whether or not they're going to get an opportunity to continue this series here, you know, this other trilogy or however many games they want to make. It is so difficult for me to come out in this video and say, oh yeah, Andromeda was not nearly as good as Mass Effect 1 in terms of the start of a trilogy. But that's not fair, right? We don't know if Andromeda is going to get a trilogy. We don't know the fully fleshed out stories that are going to be told. A lot of people look back on Mass Effect 1, including myself, with great nostalgia. I think it's perhaps one of my favorite games of all time, if not my absolute favorite. I love it more than Mass Effect 2 and 3. That's saying a lot, because those are also fantastic games. It's just very difficult to view Mass Effect 1 through the lens of it being a standalone experience that doesn't connect to another story, and on and on and on. It's almost impossible to do that. And so at this moment in time, there's a lot established in Andromeda, and I am genuinely interested to play future games. And I think they set the stage for that. They also set the stage for some DLC involving the Quarian, Hanar, Drell, Elcor arc that may or may not arrive. I think that's definitely going to be some DLC coming soon. And I might even make another video kind of expanding upon that and maybe, you know, speculating, hey, maybe we'll do this or that, whatever it may be. All right, guys, those are my immediate thoughts on the ending of Andromeda. Again, it's still been less than 24 hours since I've seen the ending, and so far, I really do enjoy the ending. I think it sets the stage for future things. It wraps up a little story arc with the Archon being very interested in the Remnant and whatnot, kind of sets the stage for future Ket activity in the Andromeda Galaxy, and on and on and on. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. I'm sure we're going to have some interesting discussions. Some people will vehemently disagree with me, tell me that the ending was awful and it wasn't really an ending, and on and on. But I'd love to have a respectful conversation with you guys, see what you're thinking. Be sure to leave your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, remember to hit that like button. I'd also appreciate that. And also subscribe for a little more tips and tricks videos, guys, for Andromeda. I've got a few more planned, and then a lot of commentary about the ending and the future and DLC and stuff like that. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.